Today we're going to look at what happens when you multiply pieces, and in this case we're going to look at pieces of pizza. So right now we are actually looking at two slices of pizza. Here's one and here's two. If I multiply both of those, I end up with how much of the pizza? I end up with the whole pizza, right? So therefore 2 times each slice, which was a half of the pizza, gives me the whole pizza. Let's look at another example. In this case, we've divided the pizza into 4 slices. Well, what if I take all 4 of those slices? 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be 4 times 1/4, or 4 times each slice, gives me the whole pizza back. We can do it with 8 slices as well. If I take 1/8 of the pizza and multiply all the way around 8 times, so 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if I take 8 of those slices, I get the whole pizza back. This also works for negative numbers, and in this case I didn't want to use a pizza. It's kind of hard to think about negative pizza, so we're going to look at the number line. So if I have negative 1/5, which let's use green this time, here's negative 1/5 right here. If I multiply that by 5, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 negative 1/5. But if I multiply that by negative 5, then basically what I'm doing is I'm taking that negative 1/5 away 5 times. So what we have to do, is well, there's actually 2 ways to think about it. We can either hop the way we did before, and then since we multiplied by negative 5, go back over this way. Or the other way to think about it is we're taking the negative 1/5 away 5 times. If we're taking negative away, we actually add it 5 times. So we add 1/5 5 times, 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5, 5/5 to end up at 1. That's a little bit more complicated, but it goes to show that it also works for negative numbers. Now here's another way of thinking about it. If I take 7 and multiply by that 1/7, I can take 7 and write it as 7 divided by 1. We talked about anything divided by 1 is itself. And then I can multiply straight across, so I'd have 7 times 1 over 1 times 7, and 7 times 1 is 7, 1 times 7 is 7, 7 divided by 7, any number by itself is 1. And I could do the same thing for 2, and in general I could do it for any number, a times 1 over a. So I could write a as 1 over a, and then multiply straight across, so I'd have a over 1 divided by 1 times a. Sorry, a times 1 divided by 1 times a, which gives me a over a, which gives me 1. That's kind of like a form of proof. So what we're getting at is called the multiplicative inverse. Now what it means is if I start with a number, what must I multiply in order to reach 1? And the answer is 1 divided by that number. So a times 1 over a gives you 1. Going back to the pizza example, let's look at the 8 slices. If you think about the fact that, okay, you have 1/8 of a slice, let's use green. Okay, actually let's think about it this way. I have 8, right? Which is 8 slices. What number must I multiply that to end up with 1 slice? And the answer is I'd have to take 1/8 of that to end up with 1 slice. So that's a different way of thinking about it than we talked about before. The other way we talked about was multiplying the 1/8 of the pizza to get 1 slice back. Either way, it goes to show that a number times 1 over itself gives you 1 back. Let's go ahead and take a look at this example. We have 7.7 times 1 over 7.7. And yes, it works with decimals as well. So notice it's just this number times 1 over itself, and it's going to give you what back? It's going to give you 1, just like the other numbers. Okay. How about negative pi times 1 over what gives you 1 back? Well, it'd have to be 1 over this number, right? 1 over negative pi. And as confusing as that looks, it works just the same. Remember, pi is just a decimal, and negatives also work, so negative decimals work. This is just solidifying the concept. So if I take, I'll go ahead and show you the answer. X times 1 over x gives you 1. And remember, x is just like variable a. So a times 1 over a gives you 1. Any number x times 1 divided by x gives you 1. Again, you can think about this as the number of slices of pizza. Alright, so let's say we have 8 slices, and if we multiply by that 1/8, we get 1 slice back. Okay, conversely, like I talked about before, which is a completely different way of thinking about it, but it's the same exact answer. Let's say that we have 1 out of x. A slice of pizza represents 1 out of x of the pizza, and let's say it's 10 slices. So that slice would be 1/10 of the pizza. Now if I multiply that by the 10 slices, that would give me the whole pizza back. So that's two different ways of thinking about the same concept, and I hope one of them clicks for you. Some of you probably are thinking, yeah, the first way clicked, the second one didn't, and vice versa. Well, that's the beauty about math. There's more than one way of doing a problem. And it just works for negative as well, so we can write negative a times 1 over negative a would give you the same thing back, 1. Works for square roots as well. See, in math, we don't want to just focus on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's so many other numbers out there, and especially when you go to do calculus and stuff, you know, you got to get used to all sorts of different types of numbers. So square root of 8 times 1 over square root of 8 is also going to give you 1. And this is a fraction, and guess what? A fraction is a decimal, and therefore it works just like decimals. 2/3 times 1 over what gives you 1. And yes, you can put a fraction at the bottom of a fraction. So the answer is 2/3. Also works with more complicated math expressions. What times 1 over xy gives you 1 back? Well, again, you can notice that this has to be the same in order to give you the answer of 1. So the answer is xy. I went ahead and threw a curveball at you, even though it's not really a curveball because we already talked about dividing by 0. If I rewrote this problem, so this says 0 times 1 over 0. Now you might be thinking it's got to give you 1 back, and a lot of my mathematicians would say it's 1, and I can't really argue with that. We've talked about 0 being open-ended, but I could rewrite this as 0 times 1 over 0. 0 times 1 is equal to 0 divided by 0. And we know that you can actually get a lot of different answers back from that. And I won't go into that. You can go back and look at that lesson, dividing by 0. Or 0 divided by a number. Anyways, the way that we often explain that is undefined, meaning it's not one definite number. Again, some people will say 1, and I've heard some people say 0, but there is no definite answer. There could be many different numbers that work for that. And I will show you real quick kind of why that works. Remember, you could take 0 times 10, for example, and get 0 back. That's equals to 0, right? So therefore, that kind of shows that 0 over 0 could also give you 10. But anyways, just showing you that. And if you put 1, I'm okay with that. I'll count that correctly. But in general, it's actually undefined. It's a better answer. So this is called the multiplicative inverse property. Basically states if you take a number, what must you multiply in order to get 1 back? Okay, and again, a way of thinking about this is if you have a pizza, let's go back to the 8 slices. If I have 8 slices of pizza, what must I multiply in order to get 1 slice back? Well, I must take 1/8 of those slices, right? Just one of those slices, basically, and that gives me 1 slice. The other way I talked about, let's look at we'll stay at this one actually. The other way I talked about picturing it or understanding concept is if I have 1/8 of a slice, what number must I multiply to get the whole pizza back? And that answer is 8. So it works both ways. Again, this is called the multiplicative inverse property. And in the future, we're going to look at a little bit more complicated version of this property.